Run through on painting some Tyranids with an airbrush. This airbrush setup that I've got is I spent less than $60 on it, and I'll show you. I bought two different things. So I bought a $30 air compressor set right there that came with a very inexpensive like hand airbrush similar to this, but cheaper. The whole thing was 30 bucks. I still use the air compressor. The other thing I purchased was this quick disconnect coupler that was separate. I think I got those for probably 14. And then this airbrush was another inexpensive one. I think this was $38 or $39. That's the whole setup. The reason I'm covering that up front is I'm going to turn the air compressor on and it's going to be a little loud. In order for this to work, I have taken a Citadel or Warhammer paint, contrast paint. I took a base paint, it was Magos Purple, and I mixed it with Lamian Medium, and I mixed this whole entire container really thinly. So I think you can see it running, it like runs like water. You can hear it, hopefully. Runs like water. That's really important for my results that I'm getting through this airbrush. It has to run like water. In order to make it even thinner, I add some airbrush medium to it. And I overfilled my jug here a little bit. It's pretty full. When you do that, if you start moving your hand too much, you spill. I'm sorry, I'm bumping this camera because it's sitting right in front of me. I'm going to try to get out of the way here in a second. So that's the setup. One of the big things is this compressor at full blast is 40 PSI. That's far too high. We only need it to be around 25. And there's no indicator at all on how much PSI you're getting put out of this little contraption. So you have to kind of tinker and find the sweet spot. And then on the brush, when you press down, you get just air. When you pull back that direction, I don't want to do it and flood it. When you pull back, it starts to release paint into that airstream. The further you pull back, the more paint you get. And that's what this little knob right here is for. It prevents you from, this is kind of like your stop. If you pick a spot, that's as far back as you can pull this needle inside, it'll hit the stop. And that way you're not just blasting a whole bunch of paint out. So on these guys right here, I initially was too thick. So the paint was coming out great, but it just coated too thickly, too heavy. So these two are really much darker than I was going for. They're almost like fully painted and covered. I'm looking for this kind of light pink consistency. So I thinned down the paint with the airbrush medium until I was getting the color I wanted. Then I did this larger model and you can see some areas. So it is a contrast. So you see where the pooling is. It creates those little, what's called coffee staining. Those are going to get a little dry brush over them. So I'm not too terribly worried about it. It would be ideal if I had a brush over here to wick that away. But you can see that the contrast paint is doing its job. It is running to different recesses. So this is truly my base coat of paint. I've got all my models primed. I shouldn't say all, but 90% of my models are primed with Wraithbone, right out of a Games Workshop rattle can. I do have one that's primed with Xandri dust, which is a little bit more sand colored. And then I've got a few that I just did. This was a brand new model, put it together, and then I just dry brushed Wraithbone right over the top of that model. So it's very inconsistently covered. And I'm just trying that out for fun to see, like, if someone, because the starter set, when you buy them, you get paint pots, a brush, and models. You don't get a primer or a spray can or anything like that. So I was treating this one as if I was painting it right out of the getting started box with just the tools that I had available, and that's the coating. So that was just one coat. I could always go over with a second coat and make it better, but I want to see how it turns out just for fun. So I've got 3 or 4 of those dudes in here. There's 2 of them right here. 2 of them are already painted. So I'm going to see if I can try to tell which 2 they are at the end, or which 4 they are at the end. So I'm going to turn the air compressor on. It might get a little loud and annoying. I won't be talking too terribly much. So this is the part where I'm pressing down, but not pulling back, and it's just letting air out. No paint is coming out. As I start to pull back, you start to see the paint developing on my finger there. The farther I pull back, the more paint there is. And you push forward again, no paint. I'm not expecting this to be able to keep it in focus very well because I've got 2 opposing pieces moving here, the model and the brush. Let's see if I can. Trying to find the best way to do this. It's kind of challenging. So for full disclosure, I'm not a professional. This is my experience with this machine and this airbrush. I've been using an airbrush for about 10 days total ever in my lifetime. So this is all new to me. I was actually getting really poor results, really bad experience with this for for the first several days. And what I found out was I was not thinning my paints to a more water-like consistency. So I was having so many clogs, I was spending more time cleaning my brush, cleaning the airbrush, more than I was actually painting anything. So one of the things I've found is that if I go really heavy, I'm going to put a lot of paint on this guy right here, just putting way more than I need to. And what I found was that if I do that and I press forward and I just have the air running, no paint, I can kind of blow that paint around using the airbrush and move it the direction I might want to move it, and sometimes even blow it right off the model. I don't know how most of these YouTube guys do this. It's kind of challenging. So that's pretty good coverage on this one. I want to get a little bit better on the tail, a little bit better on the spikes on the back. It looks different through the camera lens than it actually does in person. So really heavy on this guy right here on the top. So you can see how wet he is, how it's just glistening all over. So it is a contrast. It's going to run down into recesses. It's going to move. But because it's coming out of an airbrush, it's also going to dry relatively quickly. I'll show you a quick model that I did. So this one, I painted the tongue red after I primed the model, and then I went and did the airbrush over everything, and because the paint is so thin coming out of the airbrush, it did not affect the tongue at all. I've got another couple that I did where I had painted the hooves already and the claws, painted them black with a contrast paint, let them dry, and then came through and did the airbrush over the top of it all. No problem, just didn't affect the outcome of the hooves at all. So thought that was pretty cool. This one is again red tongue. You can see the red tongue. This is the Xandri dust, so more sand colored. I'm expecting the color of this purple coming out to affect this model a little bit differently. So I'm interested to see how it's going to look. So I try to do kind of a top down first, because what I'm going to do here is now I'm going to flip it over and everything's going to run towards the top, and that's where I want most of this paint to settle, is in the crevices at the top. But I do want to make sure I get full coverage on his chest and arms, his tail, between the torso and the legs here is kind of a tough reach. So I put a lot on there just so it'll run down in there. Then I come back and I start pulling further away with the airbrush. Just so I can get a fuller coverage. So that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. Side of the tail's not got as much as the other one. So I need to make sure I get down close to the feet. I'm not too worried about hitting the hooves or anything because they're going to be black and that will definitely cover up. The gun is the least important part for me to cover because it's going to get black and metallic. So that's probably where I should be holding it from, is the gun. Just drop that dude on the ground, so man down. I find the tail is pretty tough to cover because it's such a thin little sliver. Again, good coverage. That was pretty fast. That's part of what I'm going for here, is I'm going for fast coverage. Like I said, this is the first of several coats. So this is really going to get another dry brush right over the top of it of mostly Wraithbone. And then it's going to get another contrast paint over the carapace. So all these spikes at the top that are really not getting much coverage, I don't care about those at all because they're getting a much darker purple. These guys I'm going to have to dry brush pretty heavily because, like I said, they were just way too dark. Didn't have the paint thin enough, so it didn't run around like it was supposed to. Instead, it was just going on and drying, so it layered up really well. I mean, it still looks good. I think once I dry brush them, you'll really be able to see the details pop. This guy, again, these legs, I don't need them darker because they're going to get black on the very tips. They're going to get dark purple on the armor. So it's really the inside of the body, the tail, the cannon on top, this little inside part in the back here. Really want that to have some color to it. So more of that. That's what I'm after. So again, this whole setup for airbrushing was less than 60 bucks. It was 2 different kits that I kind of smashed together and made it work. I've only been using an airbrush for 10 days, so if I can do it, anyone can. This is one of those things I was telling myself, like, man, I'm not going to get into airbrushing because it's so expensive and it's way complicated and it's going to be so hard to figure out. And one day I just thought to myself, I'm not going to be good at it if I don't ever try. I'm not going to be good at painting if I don't try. I'm not going to be good at Warhammer if I don't play. So just get to it. You're not going to get good at something if you don't get bad at it first. I figured for the very small oh shoot. So see, I was moving my hand too much and it's spilling out of my paint pot. This pot doesn't come with a lid. It would be nice to have a lid on there because then that won't happen quite so much. So something that's really hard to show is I just oversprayed a lot, so it's really wet and I have no paint coming out, just air. So just blasting air over this guy moves the paint around to where I want it. So if I get too much paint on the belly, try and get it to focus. If I get too much paint on the belly, I just hold them upside down and blow it all down. Blow it in the direction I want it to go. And then I'll just shoot a little bit more where I blew it off. And now I've got what I want. So that little, what looks like a white spot on his forehead, that's going to get a deep dark purple, so I don't care about that. The gun I don't care about at all. That forearm. Sorry, I keep bumping into the camera. That forearm I'd like to get, because that's important. And on his forearm you can see he's got what looks like a little skin cut. That's going to get like a really vibrant purple, pink, purplish color put in there to show the muscle tone. It's like he's got muscles coming through his skin. That's going to be done with a fine tipped brush. So that one looks good. So I've been doing this for about 15-20 minutes and I've gotten through a lot of models compared to what I would have gotten done with a brush and my contrast. So I'm really happy with the speed of this. And again, this is a contrast paint. It's thinned down like to the consistency of water, so it's blowing through this airbrush really easily. Previously I was talking, I had really bad experiences with this airbrush clogging a lot at the very beginning, and it was because my paints were just way too thick. I thought I was thinning them down. They were thinned down. Everyone says like skim milk, and I had them thinned down to where they were running on the side of paint pots like everyone shows. And what I found is that the contrast comes through here way better. So if this is the only thing I use this airbrush for, is to paint contrast skin on all my Tyranids, that'll save me a whole bunch of time because I'm painting over 100 Tyranids. So these little models, they look good, but if you haven't seen, I've also done a larger model. This guy took me less than 3 minutes to start to finish. I did him on the base because he's not press fit, so he's actually glued to this base right here. It's magnetized on the bottom. So he's glued to the base. I sprayed everything. You have some really spectacular control. Like I can just start pulling back a tiny bit and just cover this little tip right here, and it's not overspraying onto the base at all. It's really impressive. That was something I was super worried about, was learning the control of overspray and things of that nature. So again, this gun doesn't need to be painted this color purple, so I'm going to hold this guy by the gun, because the very tip of the gun definitely is not going to be any purple on it at all. I'm going to start from the top down, because I want everything to run into the recesses. The tail is the hardest challenge for me, so I'm going to try to make sure I get really good on the tail. Then I'm going to come straight in on the face. I'm going to drop down to the belly, and that's hard to see because I'm in the way. Go straight into the belly, bottom of the tail, inside of the legs. Get the arms really good. And he's done. So that was about as fast as I have ever been able to apply contrast to any model. And if you miss a spot, you just, take a quick look, because my lighting over here is terrible. I'm outside of the light because my phone can't reach in there. But overall, that was a really good one. I'm going to hit this leg a little bit from the back. And I want to make sure I get in close on this claw and his hand by the gun. Those need to be painted better. So I'm just going to get in there and hit those details that I missed. And that's it, another one done. So the next thing I'm trying to do is, when I set them up, I'm trying to set them up in the orientation of how they're going to stand on their base, so that when the liquid that's still running on them, it'll settle down into recesses that are appropriate to how they should look standing on the model base. So if I just toss them down here and lay them flat, one, the paper towel is going to absorb a lot of the liquid out of them, and then two, all the pooling is going to happen in the wrong direction. So you can see on this guy, I want everything to go into the lower recesses. So again, I don't care about the top, it's getting painted a totally different color, but I want the recesses to have all this really light colored pink. I want the skin to be colored with this light colored pink, pinkish purple. So that looks exactly the way I envisioned it. That's probably one of my better well done options. Again, this guy paint wasn't thin enough, went on way too dark, so I'm going to have to do a little touch up on him. I did not do any sort of zenithal, which is a dark color on the bottom and a light color on the top, during the priming process. I just completely skipped that. I was not interested in doing that. So these guys are my, 100-man army. I've got 120 of these guys to paint, 140 of them to paint. So I'm not going for perfection, I'm going for good. I want them to look good. And as I get better in my painting skill, I will come back and add better highlights and better tone and depth and all that stuff. But right now, I'm just trying to get them all, from prime to tabletop ready, so they're getting this color put on with an airbrush. Then I'm going to go through and paint hooves and claws, tongues. Well, hooves and claws black, tongues red. I'm going to do the carapace dark purple, because I'm doing the Leviathan colors. And then I will come back and hit the eyes with different colors of neon. So some will be yellow, some will be green, some will be orange. And I tend to do them that way just for a little variety. What I'll do is I'll do whole units. I'll do a 10 to 20 man unit with green eyes, 10 to 20 man unit with red eyes, and so on and so forth. That way I kind of know which units go together, which ones were painted similarly. One of the other reasons I do it that way, my son and I, we do the campaign, the Crusade campaign, and each unit actually gets battle honors and campaign points, and they can level up with special points. So I like to have a little bit of differentiation between my units on the tabletop for that purpose, just because it's fun. So he's all done, looks good. So that was the last. Yeah, I definitely need gloves, that's for sure. I didn't grab any. I find that the paint dries on my hand so quick it doesn't transfer to the models, but if I keep it on the gloves, the paint doesn't dry very well, and then a lot of that transfer goes right into the model, and it actually makes the models very tacky, and it doesn't work out very well for me. So that's why I'm not using a glove specifically. Like I said, this paint is literally, you can see it in there, it's water consistency. It goes on very thin. It comes off pretty well. It's easy to wash off my hands. So these models are all painted. I got to grab a couple more, and I think I'm going to grab something bigger. So I've got two lictors here. They're not much bigger, but they're bigger. So I've got two lictors. So again, primed in Wraithbone. They're press fit to the base, so I can pop them off the base right now, which is helpful because I don't really want to paint the base, but even the overspray is not that bad. All my bases are magnetized, so you can hear them sticking to the metal tabletop I'm on. So I've never painted a lictor before. I'm going to do it just like these guys. I'm just going to hit them with a full top to bottom coat, because every other color I'm going to use is darker than what I'm using, and it will cover quite well. This is sort of the end result that I'm going for. So you can see how bright pink he is. He's going to get a dry brush over all the arms and all the areas that are more white on this model. That's a dry brush of the Wraithbone. Then it'll get a wash to darken it up a little bit. Then it will get the dark purple carapace done. Then the hooves and the tongue. And then the gun will get painted. And these models, I painted the gun very closely to the skin color. The new models, the ones I'm doing right now, I'm going to do a darker skin color on the gun than it is on their arms. It's not going to get the dry brush, and it's going to be a little bit more fleshy toned, kind of like almost like a brain. This is one of the other large models. These were all done by hand, no airbrush. So the airbrush is really just a speed thing. It helps. I mean, I just painted all these guys in less time than it took me to paint 3. So this is way faster. I'm going to try to move this camera a little bit. Let's see if I can. Go. I'm trying to get really well done around the feet. This guy's a lot easier because he's way more open. Hit his chest and everything quite a bit easier. So I'm not worried about the claws. Not worried about the back at all. I'm trying to make sure I hit the tail, the arms really well. The face is really important, the chest. Anything that's got more of the fleshy skin. All the way up to here. So this whole big long piece I'm going to leave white at the top. This up here, that's all going to be black. So not bothered with it at all. Again, this whole piece will be black, but the other part underneath of it needs to be purple. I need to hit that elbow a little bit. Get it from the other side. Get his face. Get all the tentacles on his face. The back of the head. And that guy's done. So now I just check to see the elbow on both of these. So I'm just looking for anything I missed that I really want to touch up. Tentacles on the face, like I said, those are pretty important to me because they are flesh toned and they'll darken up quite a bit once I put the skeleton bone or Reichland flesh shade on here. I do 3 different skin tones on my Tyranids for different units, so they all don't have the exact same flesh tone color. And I want this guy standing up as much as possible so that the paint can settle into the natural position. So I want the liquid to be able to run down into the recesses. If I flip them upside down, the liquid will run out of the recesses and it won't settle the way I want it to. This one is a little bit tighter, so it's not quite as open in the torso and the groin area, so a little bit, you know, more focused to get in there. It's important not to get carried away and move my hand with the airbrush too fast because the paint will slosh out. This airbrush did not come with a lid, so you buy a cheap airbrush, you get cheap stuff. It didn't have a lid with it. My whole airbrush setup is less than 60 bucks right off Amazon, nothing special. It's actually, I went to look it up to see if I could add a link and it's not even available anymore. But there's very similar models out there. So if you decide you want to bust into the airbrush world, it's, you know, not as expensive as I initially thought it was. I thought it was going to cost me, you know, $500 to $600. And I did it for less than 60. I was super happy. I figured worst case it would, you know, not be worth it and I'd lose 60 bucks. Means I buy $60 less Warhammer models, right? But in this case it's working out for me. I'm using it more and more and getting more comfortable with it. It's helping to improve my speed with the first step. This is the first step after priming. So it's really helping to improve this part of the process. If I can get better, I have multiple tanks and stuff to do. So if I can get a little better, I might be able to get those tanks done quicker. And it's always nice, like this is so fast, like this guy is a little bit lighter. I want him like this light. This is exactly what I really truly want, is I want it to look just like this. This guy's perfect. This guy's way too dark. So more dry brushing is going to be needed. This one's really good. I'm happy with this side of him, looks really good. This side's a little darker. So it really just depends on, you know, one side tends to be a little bit better than the other for me because I don't move them around enough, quickly enough. And if you're holding the airbrush in one spot too long, it's going to get more of the paint, more of the saturation. So it's really like keep the model moving, keep it turning. On this guy, his arm, definitely a little light compared to the rest of the model. So just get to touch him up a little bit. Try to leave him in an upward position. So I've painted more models tonight with this airbrush in 30 minutes than I've painted in the last 2 nights total by hand on this, just this first step, because this is, I tend to paint in batches. So This is taking them from primed to the first coat. Done. These guys are all done for tonight. I can work on more. I'm going to grab more models. I'll be right back. So these models that I've got right here in my hand, I'm going to do these guys backwards. So I already started on the darker purple parts. So you can see I've got the dark purple armor done, but I didn't paint any of the flesh tone at all. So I'm going to basically spray over all of it because the color that I'm spraying is lighter than this dark purple. So the only thing it might do is possibly add a little bit more depth to this purple. So just going to go right over the top of these dudes. That one's glued on. And then these guys, you know, back to basics. This is a model that's primed with Wraithbone. This was rattle can, so I just, you know, GW painted it. I painted it with a GW rattle can. Gonna hit this with the flesh tone. I'm gonna try to go really super light on these guys. There's a lot of texture in here, and I really want it to not be super, super dark on their flesh tone. So this whole upper back, the gun, the back there's a lot of armor here. That's going to be this really dark color. So I don't even care if I get that painted, but it's all the legs. The face is really the primary part. Above the face, there's this whole, I don't even know, it looks more like tentacles coming out of his head. That's the part that's really important for good coverage. So I'm going to pop these off their bases real fast. These are just press fit guys right out of the Ultimate Starter set. I grabbed a couple of those to bolster my Tyranid army very quickly. I'm going to hurry to get a lot of Tyranids very fast. I got 2 Ultimate Starter sets and then 3 Combat Patrols. All right, so I'm just pushing straight down. Air, no paint coming out. And then if I start to pull back that direction with my finger, paint. The further back you pull, the more paint you get. So in this case, this claw right here is going to be completely painted black. So that's where I'm going to hold it because I don't need it to have any purple paint on it at all. It's really challenging for me to get them set up where I can paint and have focus. So I'm going to do my best. And then on this dark purple, I'm just going to go ahead and paint right over the top of it just to show you that because I'm using a very light pinkish purple, it's going to darken this up, but that's not going to bother me at all because I was going to do that anyway. And this part right here, the airbrush for me is all about speeding this process up, getting really good coverage without getting too much paint on the model that it is too purple. I painted a couple of my other Tyranids way too heavy. They were too purple. I want this to be more pinkish arms, pinkish legs, because what's going to happen after this is I'm going to go over this lighter color pink with a flesh tone called Gilliman Flesh or Reichland Flesh Shade, or using Skeleton Horde contrast, and that's going to give it a more skin-like appearance. So that's the end result or end goal here. And you can see that his feet are already dark black. If I paint over those with a bunch of this paint and just darken it up heavily, The black is completely unaffected by it, but the part right above the black took on a lot of color because it was painted dark purple already. So it just got a little darker right there. That's it. And that's about the dark color purple that I'm going for. So if I come in here and darken that up, that's beautiful for me. Get these wings underneath, which is challenging with the brush. Make sure I get in that shoulder. Elbows. So that guy looks great. That was super fast. Get that hind quarter there. So before I move on to the next model, I always just take a quick look, try to find any spots that I'm dissatisfied with so that I can get in and give them a little love. And then I'm going to set him up. I want him in this orientation so that any paint on him can run downward, because that's the goal. I want everything to run in the orientation that they're set up on the table. So I want paint to run down. So on this guy you can see his upper armor is way lighter than the lower armor is. So I will put a little heavier focus on this upper armor with this contrast that I'm painting with and see if I can get it to darken up a little. If I can, that's lovely. If not, then no harm done. Again, this claw is going to be black, so that's where I'm going to hold him because I don't need any paint on that claw at all. Trying to get a nice light coat of paint on anything where the skin is going to be. I want the skin to have a pinkish purple appearance, not dark purple by any means. Almost pink is what I'm going for here. I achieve this by taking the same color purple that this armor is actually painted and just thinning it down with a medium until it runs like water. And then I actually added even more airbrush medium to make it run more like water. Get inside these rib panels here. This airbrush kit I got on Amazon for $39, and then I bought a second airbrush for, no, the airbrush kit I bought for $29. It came with a compressor and a cheap airbrush. Then I bought another cheap airbrush that was $39. So all in, I'm just over 60 bucks, right around 60. And then the rest was all trial and error. Lots of trial and error, but you know, the nice thing about it is you're putting paint on models no matter what. So if you mess it up, you still just go back and touch it up with a paintbrush and fix it. So underneath these wings is tough to get with the brush, so I'm going to hit those for sure. Get this downward area in these legs, hit this tail some more. Get this in. Done. It's pretty fast. It darkened up the purple quite a bit if you look at this guy's armor, comparatively speaking. It darkened up pretty well, just with a little bit of overspray. So that's pretty smooth. I like it. And this guy, I could have taken him off his base. I forgot. I was lazy. Didn't think about it. Whatever. But again, the overspray, it's not going to matter too much because the paint I'm spraying with, if you look in this cup, it's like water. It's coming out super thin. it's not going to change the color of the dark brown on my base. If it does, it certainly isn't going to be a significant color change by any means. So I'm just going to finish up with a downward spray on this guy. I'm going to put a whole bunch on him just to see. You know, I'm learning. So everything I'm doing is really truly experimenting. So overall, that armor darkened up nicely. I got a good pink flesh tone. Missed that hand completely. It's important at the very end to just kind of go over and look to see what you've missed. So this elbow right in here by my thumb, I'm not worried about that. That's going to get painted a really vibrant pink color. So all the joints get painted a really vibrant pink on my Tyranids. My Space Marines all get painted black in there. Just for an idea, this is going to be the end goal. You know, this was hand painted. So this is sort of what I'm after. And I'm on step 2. I primed them for step 1. Step 2 is just getting this pinkish colored spray on. And then that pink or purplish pink that we see on their skin, it's going to get another layer of paint put on top of it, and that's where it's going to turn this reddish brown with a really light purple undertone. And that's what I'm going for. And then all the armor that's dark purple on these 2 or 3 guys, it's already painted dark purple. Then there's just a bunch of black on the claws and the feet. And then on this one, he got green on his tentacles because he's in a unit with our acid smoke spewer. So each unit, so my other lictors will get a different color set of tentacles, so that I know they're just in a different unit. This guy right here, I already did some of the flesh tone on him. So what I did is I did it in reverse. I put the flesh tone on first. So now I'm going to spray the purplish pink over the top of the flesh tone to see what we get. So again, the gun doesn't need to be purple, so that's where I'm going to hold him. He's going to get really far away. I'm going to spray from super far away, because I just want very light coat of purplish pink on him. It's all going to be top down, just like this, and he's done. That's it. So that first coat of paint that was on there mixes a little bit with this one. That's going to be all he gets. That guy's done. So he's just a different little dude. I'm trying some different stuff on different guys, and so these ones are the ones that I'm super interested in here. I'll put this airbrush down for a quick second. So because these models are all press fit, I can pop this arm off right here. Which is going to help me get behind that gun for a better look, better coverage with the air compressor. So when I primed, you can see that priming them with the arm on there leaves a lot of uncovered space. So not super awesome, not ideal, but I'm not going to let that slow me down. So we're just going to go right over the top of those. So these guns aren't that important to me. I'm going to hold it by the gun, but the arms have to be colored. So I'm going to get the arms here, hit the back side. Just like that. The gun's going to get some of like a metallic or a black or some other flesh tone. So there's a lot of different things I do with the guns. So I'm not too terribly worried about the outcome on those. There should be one more somewhere. Okay, hiding. So with this model, I'm going to hold them far away and I'm going to spray them from quite a ways off. I just want a really light coat on these guys. There's a lot of texture in this head, the tentacles underneath the top carapace up here. A lot of fine detail. So I want to get in there, but I don't want to oversaturate it and make it super wet and heavy looking. So I'm just going to start really far away, get a good coat on everything, hopefully let all the paint run down into those crevices. So I would say I'm about 5 inches away from this model with this airbrush right now. Just really light coats. And the reason I'm doing this will dry faster. It'll hopefully hit some of the highlights for me. Give me a little bit of time to just focus on staying in one spot for a long time. Get it kind of wet and watery. And that's it, that's what I want. So all this up on top that you see is still white, doesn't matter. It's going to get a really dark purple put on there. You can still see there's some glistening wetness where the water is going to settle down. So it's all going to run off onto the back and then run down towards the feet if I keep spraying it. I'm just hitting closer to the feet here. Yep, so he's all set. That's what I wanted. I want him to be in a standing orientation if I can. So just lean him back there against the wall. And then same thing with this guy. Far away, 5 or 6 inches. Sometimes, if I get really up close, right now there's just air, no paint. If I get really up close and just barely start to let paint out, I can keep it right in that general area. So in this case, I would want it right up here, really heavy, to get it saturated in there. So I'll try that with this guy. And then I'll do the rest of them from really far away. And what I'm doing is, because I'm further away, I just kind of hover, stay on one spot for a little bit longer than I would if I were closer, till I get full coverage. So you can see this guy's completely white on this side except for where I focused really heavily on his head. So from about 5 inches away, just going to hover. I'll barely move the model. Make sure I get good around the feet because I tend to miss that a lot. So I find that I have to go back and touch up the feet quite a bit. It's annoying. I have to be better at that. And then I need to make sure I get underneath, but underneath is less important than the rest of the model. That's pretty good. He's very light colored on his lower part of his body, but really heavy inside the brain area up there. So that looks pretty cool. I think I'll do that again. The first one I hovered too long, too close, I think. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get up really close to the brain, and I'm going to barely let any paint come out, but I'm going to stay here so that it's very concentrated in this area. And I'm going to do that on both sides of the model. And then I'm going to come farther away, about 4.5, 5 inches away, making sure I get close to the legs. So I just noticed my paint is starting to run a little differently. It's coming out thinner and faster. And when I look in the pot, I'm pretty low. So I'm going to keep going because I only have 2 more models to go. I don't want to have to refill this, and I don't want to keep doing anything. So I'm going to try to be a little bit more sparing. I'm going to say he looks good, because I don't need to do his upper back at all. It's going to be a totally different color. I definitely want his undertail done. I want that brain a little bit more purple. I'm going to do some a little bit of red in there, and then a beige-ish, like a flesh color, to see if I can get the brain to look a little bit more live. So this is second to last. I got two models left here. So again, brain, head, really heavy. I'm going to come 5 inches away. I'm going to do the rest of the model fairly light. I'm going to make sure I get close to their feet and hands. So that's a spot that I've noticed I mess up a lot. Give his tail pretty good. Alright, he's done. Get this front part. So you can see where the liquid is really running into the recesses on the brain up here on the top. That looks pretty good. Alright, last guy. Should have just enough paint in there. So on this guy, because I'm trying to use up the last of my paint, I'm just going to hit them all over. So you can see how the liquid is moving. It settles into these recesses really nicely. Very water-like consistency that I've got going on here. It's a really nice color. So I'm just going to hit these guns with what I've got left, just because. So these guns definitely don't need any of this paint that I'm doing. This is more fun experiment. And that about wraps up my paint here. I'm going to go grab a different pot, switch over to some Space Marines. Hey there, I'm in the process of cleaning my airbrush and switching over some paint colors. I just painted some Tyranids. I'm using a very inexpensive airbrush. I think the whole setup was around 60 bucks. All right, that guy's clean. little too wet to be touching. I'm going to switch over to some new models and I'll be right back. I don't have any intermission music to play. I don't think he is press fit onto here. Nope. I'm getting ready to work on airbrushing this large Tyranid model. And I'm just trying to figure out how I would like to approach it. So I took Magos Purple Contrast, thinned it out with Lamian Medium to make it more thin. Then I will add Airbrush Medium to make it even thinner, help increase the flow. And when I add the additional medium, it will help decrease the purple of the Magos to more of a pink color, which is my overall skin tone goal for these guys, so that I can add another contrast over the top of that and have more of a flesh tone. So I can show a little bit. So this guy right here, if you look really close at his arm, you can see there's purple at the base, and then on top of that there's more of a flesh tone. And then in here where his skin is ripped open, you can see the muscle tone. So it's 3 different layers of paint that have to go into this guy. And in order to get that first layer, we're going to hit this big model. This guy's the size of my hand. It's pretty giant. To do that with a brush is very challenging. Keep an even and consistent color. So I'm taking the Magos Purple, watering it down with Lamian Medium, adding Airbrush Medium for flow improvement, and then I'm going to hit this whole guy top to bottom with this color. And the reason I'm doing the whole entire model is every subsequent color after the fact is going to be darker than what I'm spraying. So it won't matter that his whole entire body is going to be covered. I'm going to start kind of conservatively here with this paint, because I don't think it's going to take a whole lot. So on this, I'm doing quite a bit of Airbrush Medium. I'm going to flip on the air compressor so it runs a little bit kind of not quiet. I'm going to cover this with my finger, make some bubbles. That helps mix the paint and the airbrush medium. Test the color contrast coming out. Looks good. All right, so top to bottom, this thing is getting completely covered. But all this part I'm touching up here with my fingers is going to be super dark purple, so I'm the least concerned about what color this is. So I'm going to hold it here and do all my movement from the top. You can see that there's a little bit of a light gradient. It's darker at the bottom and lighter at the top. The bottom was sprayed with a sand colored paint. The top was sprayed with more of a white. So we're just gonna leave them stationary for a second. Start down low. This goes on very similar to a water consistency, so it might look runny. That's what I want. And what I really want is I want the watery consistency to settle in any grooves, any low spots, because that will create shading. And then in some spots, like on this leg, it's going to have these little tiny darker dots. I don't really want those. So if I hold my finger forward on this trigger, it's going to let air through, but no paint. And I'm going to use the air to spray the paint around a little bit. Try to get it off of there before it dries too much. The tail's really important, really challenging to get. I've only been using an airbrush for a total of 10 days, so I'm not very good with it. I'm not a professional painter. I do this as a hobby. This is all fun for me. I've only invested about $60 into this whole entire airbrush setup that I have off Amazon. It's not including paints or anything. Paints are expensive, but I'd buy the paints if I was using an airbrush or not. I use the same paints that I would use if I were hand painting. I just add a paint thinner, a medium, what it's called, to it to help thin it down and help it run through the airbrush better. It's hard to do this and not get my airbrush in the way. Sorry, I know it's out of focus and all that stuff, so I'm going to try to stop and show off as I go. So you can see on this armor panel here, I want the liquid paint to settle in the recesses, so I'm going to spray it on kind of heavy. And then I'm going to let it run like water into all the low spots. I do a lot of turning and twisting and moving the model. I'm using contrast paint so it comes out like water. So the air actually blows the paint around quite a lot also, which is not necessarily ideal. But it's much faster to paint in this manner for me than it is to do this by hand with a brush. So I'm trying to embrace it and learn a new skill. I'm not good at it by any means. I wouldn't say this is a how-to. It's how I do it. A lot of the next layers of paint are going to be much darker, so it doesn't matter if these are covered with light purple or not. It'll just be an undershade. More important that I get good coverage on all the parts that I consider to be skin, more so than armor. So the top part where my left hand is touching doesn't need to be painted at all. But all these joints and all these little nooks and crannies, all the rib cages, I want to get sprayed. I want to get this purple down inside the rib cage. The rib cage will then be dry brushed over with a bone color. So that will bring it back to, looking like bones and ribs. So again, I'm not too terribly worried about getting this purple in there. I want it to be deep. And then the underside of this gun is really hard to get to in here. It would have been nice if I didn't have the base, but I glued this guy to the base, so makes it more challenging to get in and hit some of these areas. It's definitely not easy to see it all in person, let alone on the camera. So it's probably not the best view for you at home watching. So take that as a piece of advice. If you decide to airbrush in your near future, don't glue the base on. Use blue tack, use double-sided sticky tape, use something other than glue. There were a lot of options, a lot of things I could have done differently to make this a better painting experience for both of us, and I failed to do it. So this is about the 15th model I've painted tonight on this live. So the airbrushing has definitely increased my productivity on getting this base coat of purple down. Kind of getting a lot of tight spots here, so it probably looks terrible on camera. I'm sorry. This is my first time doing a YouTube live with an airbrush situation here, so I'm sure it isn't great to watch. But I'm not doing it because I'm great at it, I'm doing it because I enjoy it. I always suspect people are like me. If you don't like watching it, you'll move on. So right now I'm just looking for inconsistent coverage. Things I might want to hit a little better. Now I'll do more of that top down spray pattern. The areas that don't really need it, I'm just doing it for the consistency. So that whatever I apply on one part of this model might look, you know, the shade part of it, the tone will be similar. Somehow missed this whole leg. So one of the things I found quite interesting with the airbrush and the contrast medium is the air will blow this medium or this contrast paint around more so than I expected. So if you start to get on there too heavy, there's no telling where the paint's going to blow it, and it doesn't necessarily run in the natural manner. If you laid it on with a brush really heavy at the top, it would just want to run and settle straight down into the lower recesses. So in order to make that happen, you have to be about 5 or 6 inches away to get a better brush-like appearance to your spray pattern. And when you do that, you have to stay in one area for a really long time for the paint to build up to get to that runny consistency that you're looking for. So this top shell is going to be a really dark purple, and so I'm just laying on quite a bit of this undertone here. In some of the areas to kind of get that started for me. I'm just focusing along the spine here, along these upper vents. I'm going to spray this on really heavy. I want this to be really runny. And now I'm just about 6 inches away and floating over the top of the model. Trying to just build up a little bit of layer. I'm going to hit some of these outside leg panels. So like this leg panel here is really light at the top, dark at the bottom, really light. So these are all going to be dark purple as well. The tail is going to have a lot of dark purple. So I'm just going to lay on the outside only. I'm not going to worry about trying to get the inside. I'm just going to hit that with a whole nother layer of paint. Just leave it wet and runny. Move on. And the reason I'm doing that is to let it dry in certain areas. So put it on heavy. And then move on. Give it a second to dry. Hit these upper vents here. I'm doing this for two reasons. The first one being that I've never done this technique before, so I figured I'll put it on really heavy. I'm going to go back over the skin parts with a dry brush, which will lighten everything up and take it down to, like this guy's been dry brushed already. So all this really dark purple skin will get white dry brushed over it, and you'll only see the dark underneath the dry brush popping through in certain areas. And then the dark caprice will be done where my fingers are. That'll be done really, really heavy dark. So now what I'll be doing is I'll be putting that dark over this bright, vibrant purple and see how it turns out. I want to see if there's a difference in that, because I won't put dry brush over where the dark paint's going to go. I'll just put the dark paint right over it, one thin coat, see if it maybe is nicer looking. I don't know. Who knows what we're going to get. And then this big horn on the front, didn't get really much of anything. The lower half of the gun, a little bit, but not much, so I'll just touch it here just for fun. Hit this claw a little bit because I can. So you can see that the underneath side has a little bit of lightness to it. It's a little lighter flesh tone in there. That's on purpose. So that's how it should hopefully stay a little bit lighter there. And then what I'll do is when I go to do my dark tones, I'll spread a little bit more darker colored paint from the Caprice on the inside of the armor. So this outside I sprayed. The inside I'll do with the same dark paint that's going on the top. So the inside will be darker like this to show it's more out of the light into the shadow. And since I've got, so this guy I dry brushed, I painted him purple and then I dry brushed him too heavy, so he's too white. So I'll just give him a little touch up here, just like that. Add a little bit more purple back in there. Yeah. And then I've got this guy who, so I painted him with the white primer, which was a Wraithbone primer. Then I took a brown wash, which I would usually do as my third step. I did it as my second step. So I did the brown wash first, So now I'm just going to hit him from very far away, and I say very far away, like 6 to 8 inches. I'm just going to start layering, bring it closer till I get to see a little purple in that skin. So again, this paint's going on. It's really a near water consistency, so it's going to be translucent, transparent. I don't know. You're going to be able to see the color through it. And with that, I think I'm out of paint. Yeah, good deal. All right. This is a little airbrush cleaner. Makes some bubbles. Helps pull the paint from inside the barrel here back up into the pot. I'll just dump that. You can see it comes out painted. I'll do that 2 or 3 times. Now I'm spraying it through into my mason jar here, trying to clean any paint that's in the needle area. And now I will get to cleaning it. All right, well, that's the end of this live. Thanks for watching, everybody. I've got to go do some hand painting. I will probably switch over to a new live for that if you're interested in watching the hand painting of these guys. Do it a little, so it's a little slower, a little easier to see, better quality in my opinion. This was not a very good first airbrushing live for me, but figuring out how to get the camera set up and not bump it and keep everything in focus is a big challenge. If you stayed this long and you're watching till the end and you're interested in any of the stuff I've used, I just used a very inexpensive starter airbrush off of Amazon. It's not available. The exact one I used is not available anymore, but it was a kit that came with an airbrush, a hose, and a little tiny tabletop compressor that's probably like 4 inches by 4 inches. And that's the air compressor that was running in the video. It was a little bit noisy, but it's much quieter than most air compressors that I have run in the past. So I got started very inexpensively. I'm doing this for fun. It's a hobby. It's not a profession. So I didn't want to spend a small fortune. I'd rather save my small fortune to be spent on models. But I appreciate everybody who stopped by. If you liked, I'd really appreciate it. If you subscribed, that was awesome. I appreciate that even more. The one thing I'll say about the airbrush is there is a little bit of cleanup maintenance that you have to do every time. You want to get everything as clean as possible before you put it away for the night. Otherwise, you'll find the next day it's very, very challenging. So you can see there's a little bit of purple paint on there. And as I run my finger over it, there's a needle sticking out just ever so slightly. There's a needle there. So when you go to clean your airbrush, just be very cautious of that. You don't want to take your paper towel and run it over the top of that and possibly bend it or cause any damage to that needle. So always take this piece off here. Like I just unscrewed it a little bit. No needle anymore. And now I can wipe that clean. The needle's probably the most important part of this whole entire airbrush. You don't want to damage it. You can replace them. They're not impossible to replace. It's just one of those things like, why spend an extra $15 if you can prevent it by cleaning better? And then in here, This is the ferrule. Lots of paint residue inside there. So usually you just have a little tiny set of wire brushes that comes with your airbrush. Try to just run those through and clean that through as best as you can, and it's all gone now, just like that, quick and easy. Put it back together. Again, cautious with that needle. It's not about poking yourself. Poking yourself doesn't hurt that bad, but damaging that needle, you know, costs you 15 to 60 bucks probably. All right, so that's the biggest model I've ever airbrushed. Turned out really well for my personal experience, better than if I had done it by hand. I think I have a much more consistent coverage, less runniness. So now it's a little tacky, so I don't want to touch it too much. If you're interested in airbrushing, I use this really cool airbrush setup. It's fully 3D printed. If I can make this stop doing that. So this is all fully 3D printed. It's by a guy, 35 Designs. He's on Patreon, and he's got a YouTube channel. So check that out if you have a 3D printer and you want to print your own airbrush system. It's pretty cool. If you don't have if you don't have a 3D printer and you want one, shoot me a message and I will work out a deal to print you one. But it's really neat, really cool setup. I like it. It's got little attachment things on the side so you can hang a paper towel holder. I actually have my air compressor attached to the side. So this air compressor was $29. Came with a very inexpensive little brush with it. And then I bought a second brush, which is the one I use, the airbrush. This master airbrush was 30 bucks by itself. And then these quick disconnect fittings right here was like another $10. But that way you can switch between airbrushes if you have multiples. And then I just use a cheap toolbox for my airbrush station. So everything just hangs out right here. It's mobile, moves around on my shop quite easily. Got all my Warhammer store stuff over here. All right, well, I'm going to be moving on to some hand painting over here. I just airbrushed about 28 models. Now they all need some hand painting done. And I got various models in different stages. Like this guy is partially painted. This guy's a different color scheme that I'm doing. He's my swarm lord, so he's like the main leader of my army. And then I got a bunch of space wolves over here, again in multiple stages of undone. This is the goal right here. The end result for these Tyranids will be a scheme that looks very much like this Broodlord. So, just as a side-by-side example, this really light purple skin tone will get a wash over the top of it and turn into this brownish skin tone with a purple undertone on it. And then all the leg slits and arm cuts will get this, you know, light pink put into the openings there. This little guy needs a wash. He's partially, he's almost completely done. He needs just a little bit of a wash to darken him up. And then he'll look more like that. And these gene stealers, so these guys all have the white. So it goes from this purple skin on the arms to a white tone on the arms. Then I do the red in the cuts. Then I do a skin tone wash over all of that, and it ends up like this. So that's the third step. I'm on Step 2, I'm getting ready to do the dry brush on this guy. All these models right here need the dry brush to lighten up their skin tone. So all this light purple needs to be dry brushed to have a little bit of a white tone. And then they'll get the red paint into the gashes on their skin, their flesh. And then they'll get the skin tone and end up like the Brood Lord here. He's one of my favorite models. I think he turned out really nicely. He did not get any black on his talons and claws. I did a bone color scheme on him. So all of his parts on some of my models are black. Like this little guy. The spike on his tongue, his fingers, his toes, everything's black. So I did a black tone on him versus the bone on the Brood Lord. Some of the Gene Stealers will have black as well. And some of them will have the bone color tone done. Just depends on what I'm in the mood for that minute. I don't paint any of my models to be exactly the same. I don't care if they all look the same or not. The thing that's going to set them apart is the fact that they are all individually painted in an individual style. Even though I'm painting in batch painting, what happens is when I run out of a certain color on my batch painting, I just switch to a different color and I keep going with the exact same parts on different models. So they might have, black talons, they might have bone color talons, they might have a red tongue, they might have a purple tongue, they might have a black tongue. It just depends on what's happening that day. This guy and this guy are the same model with different attachments. So this guy's got the gun, the sword, and the whip. This dude's all swords. So just depends on what's happening. This is a dark purple on the caprice up here. This is a lighter purple. So it started like this, then I kept darkening it up. And then I added a little bit of red over the top of it, and it turned to this crazy dark color here. So on this side, I need to get it to match up a little bit. So we got a little bit of work to do in making him look better. No too much light there, huh? There we go. All right. Trying to get everything arranged here in a proper, good orientation. So one of the things I really like about Tyranids is painting wings. The wings are pretty fun. I enjoy that. This light's kind of harsh. So the wings are a lot of fun to paint. I'm a new painter. I'm new to the whole. I've been doing this hobby for a year. I've been doing Tyranids for a few months. So I've painted a lot of Tyranid models in a short period, and I can't say that I'm good at it, but I'm enjoying myself. I think this guy turned out really nice. He's my favorite so far. He actually is supposed to be over in my done pile, but I keep him around for inspiration, something to look at to say that's what I want. All right, so this next part, I'm doing a little dry brushing. This is where I would say I probably have the biggest learning curve, failure rate. I'm not sure how to say it. Challenging. Dry brushing is pretty tough for me. I locked my wheel. So what I'm doing here is just getting a little bit of paint on the brush, rubbing the paint on this paper towel. You go lightly, and it should leave a little bit of paint behind. Should be able to cover up the purple here very lightly. That's too much. When you go against the grain of something, it leaves more. When you're going with a flat spot, it leaves less. I'll use my thumb because I've got purple on my thumb. So as I'm going, that's too much. That's more than I would want on my model. So I got to keep dousing it on the paper towel. And as you see on my thumb, if I go against the grain here, it picks up more paint. That's partly what you want. So on this model here, I haven't done any dry brushing yet. And what I'll do is I'll come against the grain. There's ridges here. I'll come against the grain to leave more paint on those ridges. And it will start to lighten them up a little bit. Very little bit, hopefully. Yep. So you can see right there, there's a little bit of lighter color, whereas over here there's none yet. So it makes it harder to see the defining characteristics of the model. So as I move across, I'm trying to just catch that upper edge. I'm trying not to leave any of the white paint on the big purple parts yet. That will come later, if at all. So right now I'm just catching these little raised edges. So you can see the white coming off right there. And if I want more, you can press harder, but that runs the risk of leaving paint on the purple parts where I don't want it. Or I can just stay there and do a little bit for a long time. And that is what I'm choosing to do there. And then on this skin color, so right here, there's some skin between this armor joint and this armor joint. And then on this armor joint, there's a cut where I want there to be a little definition. So I'm going to come across the grain on that. And on this arm. Back and forth because I want to catch both edges. And then on this part of the belly, you've got these like little pockets here. So here I want to try to catch those and lighten them up a bit. And I'm going to say I need more paint. So I gotta go through the whole thing again. Dab, brush, brush, brush. So I probably have too much paint on my brush, but because I'm on this belly, I'm trying to lighten up, so it's going to be kind of hard to see, but you've got these veins right here. I want to catch the raised edge of those veins. Pull them out of the purple a little bit. So anything that I'm adding a little bit of white to on this belly, when I go to add the skin tone, so again, going back to my Brood Lord, when I go to add this skin tone, everything that's got this brownish color started with purple, then it went to white, then it went to the skin tone. So that skin tone soaks into the white, and that's partly what helps pull the correct color that I'm after. So that's why I'm really trying to leave these deep purple pockets. Like right here, I want these deep purple pockets to stay there, but I want to pull some white around it. So press hard. And you see on the armor piece, I'm going against the grain, leaving the white there on the edge. On this side, there's none. So I'm going to do the same thing, go against the grain. Then I'm going to do the same thing on this side with these pockets. Try to lighten them up. Try to get these veins lightened up. Going to go against the grain on the armor. Get those edges to pop. And then so you can see in here, there's a lot of purple in this edge, in this recess. I'm not trying to get rid of the purple. I'm just trying to highlight the edge and leave that purple behind. So I'm going to pull really lightly, but I'm going to do it for a long time to try to get as much of the paint in there. And I've got to go back and forth on this top part because I want each side of these cuts to get highlighted. So this one looks really good. This side closest towards my brush needs a little bit more. The other side looks really good. That one looks pretty good. And that one is barely showing at all. So try to grab those. So again, the reason for this is to really accentuate the armor and the fact that there is raises. You know, now you can see the light grabs on that white paint. So that's really what I'm after. I've got the white paint on the very edge, and then I've got dark purple paint in the recess to really show the shadow versus the light. And that was going left to right against the grain. On these parts where there's the cut, I went back and forth evenly across to catch both sides of the cut. That will get, where's my Brood Lord? That will get the red paint put into it. And then when it gets the flesh tone, that white that's surrounding the cut right now will take on more of a reddish brown flesh color. The very underside of the model is probably the least important part to add any detail to at all, because once the base is on, it's you're barely able to see any part of that body from underneath. But if there's any facet that you can see, I really don't want to leave it undone. So I try to, add a little focus to that bottom just to make sure that I can say I did my all. So what I'm doing here, you can see the white standing out on that side. There's a little bit on this side that I did. That's, the sides are really what you can see from the base. So it's really just about trying to make it look good from the tabletop. Most people, you're looking from the top down. You're not seeing anything really. You're looking at it from this angle. You're not really seeing anything from the side. But if you have a well-painted model, people want to pick it up and they want to look at it. They want to admire your work. So, the goal is that if you paint something that looks really good from arm's distance, when people pick it up and bring it closer to them, you don't want them to say, oh, it looked better over here. You want it to look better when they get to really closely looking at it. I'm going to grab another model here. Do a little readjustment because I want to show some detail. So on this guy, if you watch the airbrush portion of this live, all the ribs are painted purple, all the deep recesses got purple in it. Once I go back over that with a dry brush, you'll see those ribs are going to become white again, just like this guy is. So all these ribs turn white, but all the purple way down deep stays purple. And that's why during the airbrush component, I took the time to focus on spraying deep inside those ribs. Doesn't seem like much, but it is really an important component of this whole process. And this is much less of a dry brush for me on these ribs, because I'm actually trying to make them white again. So for me, it's more of, a touch, drag. What I don't want to do, I don't want to turn all of this white. So I'm really just trying to focus on the ribs themselves. So a lot of touch and drag. Go downwards towards that armor plate part as close as I can. I'd rather leave it a little less perfect than to have to repaint that armor part. So all I'm trying to do is get a little bit of color back into these ribs and make them bone again. But I want to leave the purple deep inside. That's really important in this paint scheme that I'm doing. So it's a lot of touch and drag here. I'm not trying to go push hard. I'm not trying to get deep inside. I want to leave the purple. If I can, so you can see like those little circles are going to stay purple right there. If I can, I want to get as close as I can. Get a smaller brush. I want to get this top ridge if I can, right here. I'd like to get, under this arm, back here, but it gets tighter and tighter and tighter. So at some point, this brush is too big for that spot. And what I'll end up doing is switching over to, from this rounded brush to this flat brush. And that flat brush will give me more control for getting those ribs to be white and to get into these tighter recessed areas. My big round brush is still my go-to if I can get in here at the front half, because the round brush is going to hit bigger swaths, more stuff, and that's what I'm really after, is just getting more done here. So it's like touch and drag the ribs back and forth. I want to go both directions because I'm trying to get them back to bone color, because they're going to get a wash on them that's going to turn them yellowish brown, more bony looking for sure. This is not a finesse part of this painting process, that's for sure. And then once I've gotten quite a bit of the paint worked off my brush while I'm here, I can always do a little against the grain on my armor panels. Take a little bit of light on there. Just make them stand out a bit. I'm going to do a little bit on the skin because the skin needs to get more lighter color. So this isn't going super heavy on the armor at all. This is very light. It's only picking up because I'm going against the grain. Whereas on the flesh areas, I'm going on the flat spot and I'm going kind of back and forth. You can make circular motions. I want to dull the brightest parts of the purple, but I want you to be able to see the purple underneath. So if you pick this model up when I'm done, you would look at it and say, oh, it's purple, but it's also reddish brown. And that's where the Broodlord comes in. So it's going to look very much like this Broodlord. If you get really close, you can still see that there's a purple undertone under that reddish brown flesh. I'm very much a hobby painter. This isn't I'm not trying to say this is how you do it. This is how I do it. I'm learning. I'm painting over 100 models. And I'm hoping that by the time I'm done, they'll look better than not being painted at all. It'd be terrible if I finished and they looked worse than not being painted, but it's always a possibility. I like to tell myself the most important part of this whole entire thing is joy and enjoyment. As long as I'm happy with my work, I have nothing to be down about. It's all for fun. The biggest thing I have is, people watch my videos and say, oh, you didn't have good focus or you didn't have good whatever. I don't care. I'm not here for people pleasing. I'm not here for clicks. I'm not here for views. I'm here for other people who are new to this hobby, and to just say, I'm new, I'm trying new things. If you're new, try new things. I was really afraid at first to mess up my models, and I was like, oh, what if I paint this model and it looks horrible? Like if you paint a model for your first time and it doesn't look horrible, you know what you should be doing for a profession. You should be painting models. If it does look horrible, that means you have lots of room for improvement, and you only improve through failure, just like every other part of your life. So have fun failing and get better. If you're a person who paints Tyranids and you have any advice or any input, please share. I am totally eager to learn more and learn how to do cool stuff. If your only advice is to tell me to go watch some other guy, believe me, I'm doing that. I watch a lot of videos on these things. But if you have a specific color or technique or a style of brush you like to use versus what I'm using, I'm just using cheap brushes off Amazon and cheap airbrushes and cheap tools. Like I said, I'm new to this. I choose to spend the majority of my money on the actual models. But if you know there's something out there that could be helpful, don't hoard the good info. What do they call it? Gatekeeping. Don't be a gatekeeper. Hi. All right. I'm going to take a break, everybody. Thanks for watching. If you tuned in, that was great of you. I appreciate it. I need a snack.